All right.
All right.
I think we on, Josh. We
I
on?
think we I think so. I think that's what that red dot in the left corner means. All
All
righty.
right. Good afternoon. Happy Sunday,
Yes,
everyone.
indeed.
Welcome to the last of the Reset Takeover. And today is all about resetting with therapy. We know a little something about that, huh, Josh?
We know a little something. No, and we definitely are excited to really dig deeper into this afternoon. We have a panel of distinguished guests that are gonna come I think they're gonna drop some gems for us this afternoon, just to really let us know how powerful therapy is in our lives, and how important it is for our community to engage in it. So we definitely have some guests we want to make sure that y'all are getting to know. Absolutely. So how do we want to do this? Do we want to guess we can go through those bios I know are somewhere here. Melissa, do you have those handy?
No, we let's just have the people introduce themselves. All right.
Okay, yeah, that's even
So
better. Let them
each
hear
of
the way
our
they
listeners
want to say it.
know who we are, right?
Right. I guess that's a good point. Let's let them know who we are first, huh? I'm just so excited to get them. They seen us before. I just want to make sure that the stage is set properly. So, Melissa, I'll let you go first, and then I'll follow up, and we can get into it with our guests.
Absolutely. Well, hello to all of our beautiful guests. We welcome the audience, but also want to welcome you as well. I am Melissa Douglas. I am a board member here with Queen of Resilience. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker and therapist myself. And I'm representing on the Queen of Resilience side our Queens of Resilience program that we have in partnership with Harris State University, where we talk about all things from self-care to professional development to mentorship to careers and of course mental health as well. So let's hear your side, Josh.
Absolutely. So again, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Josh Jones. I am also a board member here with Queen of Resilience, where you just heard the rundown of what all we do. We're in and out of community, making sure that there is this emphasis and importance placed on mental wellness and health. And I too serve as a licensed clinical social worker. So as a part of this conversation, I'm hoping I'll be able to bring some of that expertise into this, kind of facilitating this. And I also serve with as Melissa mentions on the QR side, but I also work within the King of Resilience program, which we are be on the. We're gonna got some new things coming with King of Resilience. We're gonna be expanding. We need some brother support. We're kind of developing a team, so we'll be sharing some more information about that soon. But enough about us. Enough
Mhm.
about us. We just here to facilitate. I want to make sure that the expertise and the knowledge and the passion of our panel comes through today. So first on my screen, I'm trying to see Melissa, who you got first on your screen? I'm trying to see, make sure I get these
Yeah.
names correct.
First on my screen, I have Miss Jamie Walton.
Yes, indeed.
Hi. Well, my name is Jamie Walton. I am a provisionally licensed therapist in the state of Missouri. I currently working outpatient for an organization in the city of St. Louis called Places for People, and I also do private practice under my licensing supervisor, which is Solid P. Taylor. And so I come from a background of child, adolescence, substance abuse, and family when it comes to therapy and trauma.
Thank you. Welcome, welcome. Next on my screen, I have Mr. Etoya White.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Etoya White. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I have a private practice, self-branded Etoya R. White Therapy and Coaching in the Olivet area, where I do individual, family, couples counseling there, as well as life relationship and performance coaching. Also have a consulting company, the Etoya R. White Brand LLC, and I do education and mental wellness consulting. And I'm also a member of the board of directors for Chad's Coalition for Mental Health.
Thank you. We said distinguished, didn't we, Josh?
We sure did. We sure did. And we only halfway through the panelists.
Halfway
Like, wait till
through.
you get to the other half, man.
Next up, I have Dr. Knight.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Gina Knight. Very glad to be here with you today. I own a private practice as well, Liberty Counseling and Consulting. I've been a therapist in the community for about 15 years. My work has been primarily around families dealing with trauma, as well as really a myriad of things. Adoption was my start. I have a doctorate in medical family therapy, so I do a lot of work around families that are coping with illness and helping to support other members of their family as they go through barriers to health, challenges that come with health. So, also a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I teach at 2 different universities as an adjunct faculty.
Awesome, awesome. Welcome, welcome. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Arnold, name twin, Melissa Arnold.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So, yes, my name is Dr. Melissa Arnold. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. My doctorate degree is in forensic psychology with a specialization in forensic legal issues. I, as well, also own a private practice where I do individual, couple, and family therapy. But the consulting side is more so I plan to incorporate my doctorate degree to do things such as psychological autopsies, competency to stand trial evaluations for minorities or anybody who needs those, and jury selection. So being consulted to help with the jury selection. I just also opened a group practice called B&M Counseling with one of my really good friends and colleagues. And I currently work for one of the major insurance companies here in St. Louis, Aetna. I work there as a utilization manager, but I was just received my new role as a clinical supervisor for EAP.
Awesome. Such a wide variety we have here, which is going to be awesome for our conversation today. I want to just set the stage real quick, just so people can be aware of like kind of our goals and what we're wanting to kind of achieve on today. And that's really for our participants, the people that are joining us live on this here Sunday, to just have tools to establish stability when it comes to our home lives, right? So everybody that's here has a wealth of education and a lot of different roles is what I heard professionally among this panel. And I know a lot of our participants can relate to that, right? But when we take off those, work hats and clock out, we have a huge responsibility within our homes as well. A lot of us might be parents, have significant others, and we just really want everyone to understand the need for therapy within the household, both individually as the people who make up the members of your family and whatever that might look like, as well as collectively as a family unit. We're going to talk about just some differences between just mental health, some of these buzzwords that we hear. Self-care and soul care has become a new one, as well as just distinguishing between mental health and mental illness, but then also just talking about just traumas. Right. So we know that not only generational trauma, but intergenerational traumas impacts our home. And how can we move forward with the process of healing and wholeness, again, not only individually, but collectively. But we also have a giveaway that we want to let you all know about. Josh, you want to fill them in on the giveaway?
Absolutely. No. So I this is the part I'm hoping y'all are excited about, because I know I am. So we couldn't let this reset takeover take place without making sure that y'all left with a little bit of something. So we want to make sure that you're qualifying. So there's a few things we need you to do to qualify for the giveaway that we're going to do at the end of today's conversation. So first, we need you to go and follow our Queen of Resilience Incorporated page. All of those handles you can find on all our social media. I think we're Queen of Resilience on Facebook. I know we're Queen of Resilience on Instagram. So please go follow our pages. We need you to follow Miss Lynn's Affirmations. So we'll make sure that you have all the correct spellings and all those things as we add them to the chat. Also, if you're already here, come on into this live chat. Come on in, stay a while, take some pieces, make sure you're getting this information, and make sure to tag a friend. So that's what we need you to do. So I'll say that one more time. Follow our Queen of Resilience page. Follow Miss Lynn's Affirmations. Stay tuned for this after this great conversation we're about to get into, and make sure to tag a friend.
Awesome. I don't know about you, Josh. I'm trying to share real quick. Panelists, can
Right.
y'all take a second and share as well so your people can know what you got going on right now? All right. I got you. I got it.
Cool.
Okay. So let's really get into this. We didn't set the stage, we didn't given the instructions, we got the people on the giveaway. let's really get into this. I think a great first question that we can start with to set the stage on just terms and all these different things that people hear in terms that's floating around. Can any of you or maybe a few of the panelists can talk about just what's the difference between the terms mental health versus mental illness, and then self-care versus this new term of soul care? Can you give us some definitions to start this conversation as we lead up to talking about therapy? Don't be shy.
I can go ahead and start. I can start.
Dive on in.
Okay, I wrote some notes, so if you see me looking away, I got some notes, okay? All right. So when I think about the term mental health, I kind of think of it as like almost like a blanket term, basically to just identify a person's psychological or emotional well-being. Whereas mental illness kind of goes a little bit step further, which means that this mental health issue that someone may be having, so depression or something, is now affecting that a person's ability to function over a long period of time. Okay. Whereas, like you say, self-care and soul care, both self-care and soul care kind of acts as something for someone to be able to replenish one's, I guess, state of being. However, self-care is any act that someone may take to take care of themselves. So whether it be exercising or taking a vacation or reading a book or whatever you feel as though they can kind of help you wind down. Some people like to take a warm bath at night, for self-care. It could be kind of any of those things. Whereas soul care, usually when I think about that, it kind of refers to taking care of your spiritual health. So some people identify that as praying or meditating or just attending a service, something like that, something that's spiritual towards them.
Mm-hmm. Those are great definitions to start. Anybody else want to add to that? Thank you, Dr.
Yeah, soul care is a new one for me, so I would be guessing. With that one. Not that I wouldn't be qualified to guess, but personally, I guess mental wellness, mental illness. Obviously, mental illness includes any kind of organic conditions that affects one's individually, affects one's mental or emotional state. But specifically for self-care, because it is a bit of a buzzword, it's a hot take, buzzword right now. But things for me, because a lot of the consulting that I do, especially with staff, I do a lot of professional development around self-care. A couple of things that are important about it is that it's preventative and restorative. And it's also a set of skills that once practices consistently, regardless of whether or not they encounter stress. And so that's kind of the thing that sets self-care apart when it's, when it's implemented accurately. On the other side of that is the coping strategies that you learn that you use in conjunction with the set of skills that you develop as your self-care routine.
Good.
Yeah. Any of our other panelists have something that we want to add or share, or that we feel like is important to share in this conversation?
I can add just a little bit to the soul care topic, if you will, and I think just sort of adding on to what's already been said. A lot of times we're doing soul care in therapy, and as Mr. White just said, it is fairly a newer term, and so we may not even be realizing we're doing it. But when we do things like helping people work through forgiveness, for instance, that is very spiritual and it's something very deep and meaningful. When we're doing things to help our clients or family members, whomever, work through tough issues that come up with relationships and how that sort of helps them to identify who they are and what they want to have with other people in terms of connection. That's also soul care. It's not necessarily a broad term, but I think we're still doing it in a lot of ways. And sometimes we don't even realize that we're incorporating it already into our practices. So.
Like that a lot. That we're often doing soul care when we don't even recognize it. No, I think a lot of that aligns well with what we talk about within these therapeutic spaces, right? It's like to be taking care of our mind. It's difficult to say I'm just taking care of my mind or I'm just taking care of my body. These are things that are constantly intersecting in a way that when we're talking about those things, why they added that to that biopsychosocial spiritual aspect of things, that's why they got added. No, that's a great point.
I wanted to add something onto that because a lot of the populations that I work with, they don't want to recognize mental health. So sometimes I do compare it to like physical health. We all have physical health, but not all of us have like diabetes or high blood pressure or anything like that. So sometimes I have to kind of relate it in those terms so that people can kind of understand that I feel like if we have any emotions or feelings or anything like that, we have mental health because we are human beings, so we have this, but the mental illnesses is different, just like we have different diagnoses or health diagnoses when it comes to that.
Okay. Am I the only one that's having trouble hearing Jamie? I'm not sure. It's kind of going in and out. I'm not.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
real clear for a moment, but it sounds like you're underwater for a second. So
Yeah.
um
But I can tell you spitting some fire though, so we want to make sure we get that corrected. So yeah, we'll test it again as we circle back through some things.
yeah.
Okay.
One thing that I did hear Jamie say before it disconnected a little bit was just talking about the populations that she serves and them not always being very open to the idea of therapy and these things that we're talking about, which I think adds to another question. Like, as we're talking about resetting with therapy, there has to first be an awareness and an openness to this thing, right? So I think it's sometimes we can do an injustice if we don't first talk about and normalize the idea that we still know that there's a stigma against like mental health and therapy and all of that. So if one or a couple of our therapists can just touch on, just kind of speaking to that stigma, maybe where it came from, why it still persists, and how you might still see that showing up in your work today.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, that's
Yes.
Okay,
Way
I
better.
took off them so-called fancy AirPods, so hopefully.
great.
I'm gonna say for me, I come from a church background. I'm a pastor's kid, so
Praise God.
stigmas, amen. Stigmas that I'm so used to are within the church. I have been in church my whole entire life, and I never heard anybody say go to therapy, coping skills, nothing like that. It was either you go to your pastor or you pray about it. Like, you're too blessed to be stressed. And so that's really why I got into this field, is breaking those stigmas within the church, that you can believe in God and Jesus and still have your therapist over here at the same time, just as you still have your doctor and you still have all these other people in your life, that there is a space where both of these can coexist in the same space. So I think it takes more people being vocal about it within the church to kind of break that stigma of saying that, hey, I have a therapist, or I take medications, or I got my kids in therapy for whatever reason. I think it takes us just being more vocal and being more honest about where we're at.
I want to expand on that, and I'm going to try to not geek out for a minute. But my research is with historical trauma, and our reluctance to connect with people in healthcare goes way back to the fact that we were, unfortunately, folks who had been experimented on, and folks who could not trust people that claimed to be helping us, right? And so even today, we're still trying to figure out who can we trust, who can really come through for us and help us and show up for us in a way that is meaningful and supportive and authentic. And so we have a history that we are up against, really, and it's in our bones. It's not even just about what we've been told, but it's also a part of our DNA because it has gone through generations. Trauma can. The last study I saw, it said it can. It is over 22 generations. That's amazing to me. Like, when I even just think about that, it's scary and it's amazing at the same time that those things are stored in our cells for that long. So we have a lot of work to do to pull out of the stigmas and the fear, the reluctance to trust people that say they're there to help us.
Yeah, I'll add to that, and actually, I'm just like, yeah, just geek out because that's the conversation, honestly, that we need to have, and really, the reality of the situation is it takes us, the community of Black and Brown mental health providers, because even us, we deal with from an insurance standpoint and from a stigma standpoint, we deal with Eurocentric concepts of mental health and mental wellness, and that's a part of the perpetuation of those stigmas. And for us, in and from Black and Brown spaces, we're a communal people, and so It's the idea that everybody doesn't need therapy, but everybody needs relationships. So if the part of this reset is we focus on the resilience, this vicarious resilience that can come through relationships with us, at the front, just like we needed more, black and brown teachers, school leaders, doctors, all these different kinds of things with regard to representation. We need us as representation of how to rebuild the community with the focus on those relationships, and that's the pushback that we need against the Eurocentric concepts of mental health and mental wellness, because we have to unfortunately we have to pathologize people in order for them to get help, and that's a part of that process of breaking down those barriers. And sometimes people just need help. Everybody doesn't have depression or anxiety. Sometimes people just need help, and in order for them to get that, we have to pathologize them, and that's a part of the stigma as well.
And I'm just going to jump on in and just piggyback off Mr. White and also Jamie's. I also grew up in the church. My dad was head deacon. And not only is there a stigma around just going to therapy, I was raised where we didn't even know what that word even was. I was told you don't go talk to those people. And I'm like, I couldn't, by the time I knew I needed to go talk to one of those people, I didn't have a name for them. So not only are we battling stigmas, we're battling, honestly, just a huge realm of just ignorance when it comes to mental health, who these practitioners are, and what they are able to do for us, and what the differences are between them. What is the difference between a professional counselor and a social worker and a marriage and family therapist or a psychiatrist? Something that now as clinicians, seems so mundane or something so simple. People don't even really understand what these terminologies are and what we're able to provide to them.
So I guess before, because I think these are all great points, and I want to make sure, because it's come up a couple of times. What is this thing we call trauma? I think it's one of those words that gets tossed around a lot, and I'm not sure that everybody fully understands what it is, because I think we're speaking to examples of trauma and what it looks like within these spaces. But what is trauma? How do we define it? How do we know it when we see it?
Yeah, that's
So
good, Doc.
the easy textbook Webster whatever definition is that trauma is a psychological response to a distressing event. That's the tip of it, And then of course we have all types of trauma and how it pervades in one's body and in one's family and all of those things. So, but that's the simple form of it.
Thank you.
Okay. So what, anybody else have things to add to that definition, or like how they maybe would define it for someone who came into their office kind of looking for a definition around trauma as they heal through it?
Yeah, I support that. I think we have to start with that as the framework, because a part of what we do is it's important that we provide that level of education for folks in developing those levels of vocabulary and emotional intelligence. And I think that's a solid framework to start from.
Okay, that's great.
So I'm gonna take it a step further from that, because I think some of these words still hold a lot. So a psychological response. What can even be an example of that? And then what qualifies as a distressing event?
So I'll jump in. I think I understand what your question is, Melissa. So so a psychological response could be, it could be anything. It could even be, to me, when I think of it. So an example of a traumatic event, we could go with domestic violence. A psychological response could be something as simple as just being withdrawn from people or not trusting people. Like, I don't trust anybody because I think they may cause harm to me if I don't do what they say. When we think about trauma, like there are a few different prongs to trauma. So we have a single event, we have chronic events, and then we also have some complex events. So a single event may be, I was in a car accident. I've only been in one car accident, and that was traumatic for me. So every time maybe I get to the car, I may feel anxious. I may start to worry. My hands may start to sweat. Whereas maybe a chronic event would be something more along the ongoing domestic violence. So it's more, it can be repeated or some type of prolonged event. Whereas complex trauma gets into when you think about maybe police officers, firefighters, medical doctors, even us as therapists, when we have to hope when someone is continually exposed to trauma, it can come out in a few different ways, whether it's psychological or emotional responses, or just continued to be privy or exposed to this trauma ongoing. So as therapists, we hold the trauma. As doctors, they try to fix the trauma. Police officers, firefighters, they're walking into trauma every day.
I like the idea of breaking down the terms too, because sometimes people don't realize how their bodies are responding to trauma, right? Because they don't even, especially in our community, I'll say it like this: we're taught to keep moving. You keep going. It's all good. You got this. We say those things to each other: stop crying, suck it up, be a man, whatever else that might be. And we don't even realize that our inability to sleep sometimes is a result of not dealing with something that is has happened or has occurred. So oftentimes when I'm explaining what trauma is, or talking to clients about trauma, I talk to them about their symptoms and how those things are related to the things that they've experienced, right? So that they start to make those connections for themselves. It's not just me doing it, but that they can sort of understand that, sadness or whatever. I give this analogy of you and I, one of us, or maybe all six of us, going to Forest Park, deciding to get some exercise in, and we go for a walk. And all of a sudden we see a little shrub start to shake. And we're all like, what's that? What do you, right? And there's a bear that comes out, he rises up and he's like, I'm here. And we all have different responses to that. I'm running. I don't know what y'all gonna do, but I'm out. Okay. And then a few months later, for whatever reason, we all decide we're oh, by the way, the zoo came and got the bear and the bear is back in the cage. A few months later, we decide to go back to Forest Park again and go for this walk. And we're laughing when we do it because last time we came, it was crazy. But all of a sudden we see a shrub start to shake. And our immediate response is, no, it is not this bear again. And it's not, it's a squirrel, right? But sometimes what we feel in our bodies are, a result of things that have occurred in the past. And we don't even make the connection unless we have some verbiage, unless we can actually have somebody help us to understand what it is that we're feeling and why, and connect that with events. So I like that question a lot, Melissa.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you expanding on that and giving us such a real analogy that we can kind of see and feel and imagine us all doing that. Because I think oftentimes, like you said, there isn't a realization of what I experience is trauma because what I heard somebody else's qualifying event for trauma, I haven't experienced that. Or I know other people who have it worse. So there's a lot of experience of discounting that we have our own individual experience and responses that can be traumatic if they are for us. So I very much appreciate you breaking that down and giving us something real to walk through with that.
For sure. And I guess too, just to kind of help point to some of the things that we see within our communities, how can you speak to whether it's from what you've learned through your schooling or through your experiences with some of your clients? What would you say are some of the trauma symptoms or responses that are most prevalent and impactful in our communities?
Well, right now, I mean, anxiety is major, especially with just kind of what's going on through the pandemic. With isolation and things of that nature, people have had to make adjustments to it really ultimately lifestyle changes that we're still making adjustments to. A lot of the work that I've done with the professional development. Because in the we're talking about burnout and all kinds of other things that happen, and so anxiety. While there are many, one of the one at the forefront with what I've dealt with, it has a lot to do with anxiety.
I was going to add that too because I deal with a lot of teenagers as well, and them going through school and this pandemic, it really increased their anxiety, but also like depression because everything was changed for them. They could no longer connect to their friends for real or see them in person and all these things. They didn't get proms and they didn't get to go to homecoming. So their whole social atmosphere had been changed. And so you see them in a room all the time, or they're on the computer all the time, and it increased that anxiety and depression for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw through, work with the CHATS Coalition and the, the research we do, obviously, with along with anxiety and depression, we have increased rates of suicidal ideation and those kinds of things as well. So those have definitely been ones that we've dealt with.
Oh, man. So and you're saying that like within this is you're saying it's coming from the impact of COVID and isolation. You're saying that's something that's a trauma within itself.
Absolutely, because
Man,
emotionally, right? So
yeah,
these changes that have had the health. So socialization for a lot of people is an aspect of mental wellness, right? And just being able to connect to people. And sometimes what we often discount is these, how our personalities and emotional wiring affect how we interact.
yeah,
And so having that taken away or having that change, has impacted students academically, it's impacted them socially, behaviorally, and so on. And even for the teachers and the staff, they're used to being in front of their students, being able to teach, and then to have had to completely flip around what they do professionally. And then parents have had to become educators. And many of them not having the proper supports and things of that nature. So it's absolutely caused just multiple levels of change. And again, there's your entry point for various levels of anxiety and depression. And then people from a family dynamic standpoint who may have been dealing with issues, now we're all in the house together all day, and a lot of those issues have been
yeah.
exacerbated because we don't have the supports in place in order to navigate those situations.
For sure, no, and that's a huge thing because I actually saw this stat just kind of like bringing the school piece into perspective with us going on what is virtually year like school year three of being with in a global pandemic and what that means that the third graders right now haven't really or fourth graders whatever year they are they haven't had a normal school year in their whole school experiences. The seniors that are at their senior year now haven't had a typical high school experience up until now, and that's something that is really something that we have to be taken into consideration as our youngins are navigating this educational space. And additionally, the point that you made about being more isolated within the homes, like I've heard statistics about domestic violence instances going up because people are trapped in their homes as it relates to being in those spaces with violence and trauma in those ways. So I think those are some of the more seemingly subtle ways that COVID has been traumatic. It's like, yeah, the obvious things with like the death and the loss, but there are very like real life examples of how trauma has bred off of what comes with being in a global pandemic for sure.
Mm.
Are there any other examples that you've seen that have kind of been like that kind of byproduct of what it means to be in this global pandemic?
I mean, you talked about one. You talked about grief and loss. I mean, some of
Hmm.
the issues that I know I was working with a couple of doing some consulting work with some districts out of state, and just the number of people who, like, people have died, and sometimes I think sometimes it's hard to connect. Like people have died, and just the stress and the anxiety that have come from not being able to attend a memorial service or
Hmm.
having to attend it a different way or having to whatever, just completely not be connected to people, or whatever have you, because I, experienced a little bit of that, myself. And so not having had the outlets to deal with that in a very real way, or to know or acknowledge that grief and loss is unresolved in some of these cases because those experiences were essentially taken away. Right. To have, family and friends and loved ones pass away and to either not be able to attend for travel purposes or whatever the case. I mean, those are very real aspects of the situation as well.
No, that's so true. And I think even within our family systems, we're constantly looking for ways to support each other, and making sure that we're able to cope through these challenging times that are a result. So I know, Dr. Gina, you're doing a lot of work with families and supporting families. So are there any ways that you would say you would recommend that families are making sure that they're able to take care of one another and dealing with all of this loss and what that comes with?
Yeah, I think just sort of piggyback off what Mr. Weiss said, with all of the changes that have occurred, we have to also remember that these changes have been very sudden. and very rapid. And so whereas, families tend to have some sense of which role is played by which person in the family, now the roles have had to shift very quickly. Like it was mentioned that, all of a sudden mom is a teacher or dad is a teacher, however that works in any given family. And there's stress that comes along with that, right? That may or may not be vocalized. So one of the things that I've tried to do to help families is, first of all, talk about what are the priorities that we need to take care of first. What are the things that we need to put into place so that as these roles have changed, everybody gets what they need. Moms being home, listen, I was one of them. Moms being home with the kids all day, every day, needed breaks. They needed chances to get out and go walk the neighborhood, take a breath, whatever that might look like. Folks who were, still trying to get out into the workforce, but coming home with a lot of anxiety, had to find some ways to check that. I think some of that has started to change a little bit, because we adjust as humans. We try to figure it out. But first thing is really to try to get everybody on the same page about what's needed. We had kids who weren't getting meals, and that's a priority. There's a lot of things that you just can't do in terms of talking to kids about education and discipline and all that if their basic needs aren't met. If we have folks who need medicine, we have to figure out how to help them get those needs met. They need the medicine that they need to survive, to be okay in terms of their health, their mental health, all of that. So really it's all about prioritizing. Where do we start? What do we need to do first? What are the first steps to make sure that everybody has what they need in order to be well? And I think on top of that, then it's sort of like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We start with those basic things and we build our way up to find ways that we can de-stress. Game nights. Let's sit around. I mean, now it's a perfect time to go outside with a fire, right? And roast marshmallows or whatever you do. Just sit out there if you want. But we can sort of like build our way up in terms of figuring out how then we can take care of ourselves in other meaningful ways and support each other together. Yeah.
No, that's huge. Anybody else have anything to add to that? There's so many gems there, especially like kind of redirecting, like making sure we're attending to those basic needs. Because I think a lot of times we're at level 2, level 3, level 4. When level 1, you can't skip a grade, right? You got to make sure that those basic needs are met. So any other advice in terms of supporting people within our families and within our communities, supporting each other?
I'll go ahead and chime in. I think one thing that we've forgotten, like with being stuck in the house these last 2 years and things like that, what I've noticed even in my own personal life is how close you can be with your neighbors. How like I work from home. That show Fear Thy Neighbor is real. I don't know if y'all watch it on ID, but so you can be real close with somebody or you cannot be, but just really being mindful of them. I have an older gentleman that lives across the street from me. If I don't see him come out in a few days, like I'm concerned, like what's going on? Because even though we don't speak on a normal day, we're just more vigilant now of like, okay, our neighbors, what are they doing? Because we're just kind of here all the time, and even to the right of me, I have 2 95-year-old neighbors, so I just try to keep in contact with them, not only with my own family, but they have now become my family because I see them all the time. I'm more now, I'm not trying to be a nosy neighbor, but I'm just more aware of their schedules and they are of mine, so just we don't want to be that neighbor that's overbearing, but just being mindful of like, something may be a little off. Is it something that they may need,
No, I like that a lot, especially kind of it reminds me of what Brother Toya was speaking to early on in the session, is being mindful of some of those more Eurocentric ways of incorporating and connecting. I think there's a lot of Afrocentric ways that we're leaning on now as it relates to maintaining a community. We can't afford this individualistic way of approaching how we are maintaining wellness. This is something we have to be making sure to do as a community, and I think that it starts there with being aware of even if y'all not talking every day, watching those patterns and not doing, like you said, not being a nosy neighbor, but just being a healthy neighbor, if you will, making sure that everybody's safe and maintaining the things that are required of us as a neighbor, what that truly means to be someone's neighbor. I like that a lot. Yes.
I want to add something on there too. I was the mother at home with the kids. My house, the cafeteria, a playground, a classroom, an office, and so because of that, my days were running together. Like
Yeah.
the time that I woke up to the time that I went to sleep was a blur. And so I had to be really intentional about my time and get really strategic about what I gave my time to, what I didn't give my time to, whether it was my kids or whether it was actually creating space, because we were inside for almost 2 years within my house that was going to be specifically just for me, to where I can just sit there and unwind and not be a mama or not be a therapist or not be this or that, but just to be me and to give back to myself. Because as a woman, we're kind of routine to just give, go, 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 go. We don't necessarily have that opportunity to tap out like other people can. So being very intentional with your time and being intentional in your communication with people who you're checking on too. So
Yeah. No, I think everybody in some way, that those roles like we talked about were expanded and divided and shot. Everybody got a taste of every other part of life. All the parents have a different appreciation for the teachers now. I think once
Absolutely.
they've had, like you said, you got more appreciation for the people that are dealing with the lunches, the people that's watching over the recesses, all of those people. I think it adds that much more to being able to know and deepen the roots of that community effort that we were just speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've just kind of naturally transitioned into really thinking about how can we take care of ourselves and our homes throughout this time.
Mm,
I wanted to take one step back for people who may not, they're just going through the motions,
mm,
right? They found themselves on autopilot. As Jamie said, she said the day was just kind of blurring, all together. For those people who are just coping and surviving and still trying to figure out how to pull all the pieces back together again, what are some things that our families, our men, our moms, what are some things that they can be aware of? So when we think about our home lives, what are some things that they can consider? And I want you all to kind of think about this from your different kind of specialty areas too. I know Mr. White is really focused on men. Jamise is a lot on teens. We have two family therapists as well. But from your population's perspective, what are some things that they can be mindful of, or that you can tell them, hey, if this is happening within your home, or if you've noticed this has shifted in this way, these are some things that you can be mindful of that might be telling you a reset is needed. I know that was a long question, but I was trying to paint the picture for y'all. Let's start with you, Mr. White, as a man in a house, in whatever house he might be in, right? What are some things either in himself or within his family unit that might be could be looking different? That might be something to be concerned about. What might that look like for him?
Yeah, just kind of being more I think just the word mindful in and of itself, and then just helping men understand what that actually means and how they can apply it. And so a lot of the things that I do, or the work that I do, is in helping men develop just kind of some well, we talk about the term emotional intelligence, and so that's really a focus right now, and just so that men can have permission to feel what's going on in their bodies, and then going through a process of actually recognizing what those things are, and then putting a name on them, so that they can accurately explain what's taking place. So, and that for men, because oftentimes what we end up focusing on is those secondary or residual, emotional expressions, which is, the anger and those kinds of things, where just that the opportunity to, or the understanding to just say, hey, I'm sad. Hey, I am, disappointed. Hey, I'm feeling neglected, or those kinds of things. And so then that way we can put, some skill development around how we can resolve those issues. And, I work with families and couples who, now have to face each other and deal with these things and develop a new patterns of communication with each other off of these concepts, right? Because we have to deal with them now, otherwise they'll continue to get worse. So that's a lot of the work that I do, especially with men, is just taking a step back, because unfortunately many of us haven't had the opportunity to develop moral and emotional reasoning based off of faulty concepts of maleness, manhood, and masculinity. So a lot of the skill work is in just developing emotional intelligence. Now emotional intelligence is a big term, broad brushstroke, but we break that down in so brothers can understand what that actually means and how they can apply it for healthier relationships.
No, that is so real. I'm finding more and more, especially with the men that I serve as a therapist, is that like it seems like basic kind of rudimentary things when we're talking about understanding emotion. But I pull out this emotions chart. It's like, okay, let's begin to describe this with real words, so it's not just something that we're jumping straight from this emotion to this potentially problematic behavior that comes in. And it seems like what comes with mindfulness is us really just having that space between when we're experiencing emotion and the behavior that follows and the thoughts that are connected as a result, and all those things interacting is just such essential work when we're talking about developing that emotional intelligence, being able to name it. I say it all the time. I stole it from somebody at some point, but if you can't name it, you can't tame it. And it's just so much power in being able to
Yeah.
name what it is that you're trying to heal.
Yeah, developing that vocabulary is critically important. And just for men to hear that, like you have permission to do that. You have
Hmm.
permission to call it what it is. So now that you have these thoughts. So we have these thoughts, but our emotions drive the bus. Our
Yeah.
emotions tell us what to do with the thoughts. And
Hmm.
so it's and being able to sit still and in that space and learning how to take a time out and building these skills that will allow us to, take a break, actually think about what's happening as opposed to these emotional responses that we have. And again, those are often secondary or residual because it's like, something happened at work and now I'm
Hmm.
carrying that the residual as I go home. And now everybody can get it now because I'm
Hmm.
had an opportunity to emotionally regulate and keep the main thing.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what I'm interested. I know we talked a little bit about the men. I know, but I'm interested to hear we talked a little bit about what it looks like for a school. Like, what does it look like for our teens and adolescents that we're working with to kind of be navigating what it's like to be in that home space that we mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, Teens are so tricky.
Ain't they though?
They really are. And one of the things that I would look at their behaviors. If there's any change in, or if they're becoming more isolated, or if they're becoming more aggressive, or if their grades are dropping, if they're not keeping up with their like normal hygiene, or even if they're going out and being with their friends and being social. Those are all signs to kind of look for. And I think the biggest thing with them is talking to them,
Mm,
is getting them to communicate, and not trying to devalue what their feelings are and what they're going through, because realizing everything that's going on in their world is real to them. Even though it may be minute to us, it is so real to them. And they
mm,
are dealing with things that we've never done before. I don't know what it's like to do high school, middle school, elementary school on a computer. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what that entails for them and how it plays on them, mentally and things like that. So just being more sensitive to them and their behaviors, really.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes.
I want to. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to sort of add to that too in terms of their behavior, also noticing if they have physical ailments or things that they're complaining of, other symptoms that they may not have complained of before. So even with my girls, so we had this incident where both of them all of a sudden had these stomach pains, and they just seemed so random. They weren't eating crazy food, and I ended up reaching out to a friend of mine who's a pediatrician. She said, "Oh yeah, it's this lower stomach thing going on, and it's been a whole thing." And I was like, "What? What is that?" She's like, "It's anxiety." And parents don't believe me when they bring their kids in and we
Hmm.
go through all of these different tests and changes. She's like, "It's anxiety." She's like, "Get
Yeah.
them out the house, Gina." It's like, okay. So, but kids do. They have symptoms sometimes that they will tell us about. Whereas we ourselves, again, we just sort of like bear through. We take the Advil and keep it
Hmm.
moving until we're doubled over and can't take it anymore. So
Mhm.
I would say that if you have physical pains that you're noticing, or your kids are talking about pains that they're not, don't take that pain and just sort of like shove it to the side. Pay attention to it, because it could be telling you more about your physical and or mental health.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to add on to that too, because I deal with this with my son. He's like 9 years old, but he always complains of when he's around big crowds. Oh, my stomach hurt. I feel nauseous, and so having to explain to him what that was, or even biting of his nails, it was all
Mm,
signs of that he was dealing with anxiety and that he was anxious about something. And so instead of me just like pushing him into a crowd, I had to be sensitive to listen to him and then explain to him what was really going on within his body. So
mm,
I think that's good.
Yeah. And just the
mm,
power of breaking down. Like, I think I noticed that to be the hugest benefit to our kids is when you just can explain something to them. I think too often kids get that, oh, this is just what it is, or they're so out of control of everything that's happening too. So the more that we can explain and break down and be sensitive to what they're experiencing is what I hear you all saying. It helps them a great deal when they're in a world that they can't really control anything that's going on around them.
Yeah, and just I guess to sum up what everybody has kind of been saying, is my main when I thought about that initial question is, as a therapist and it's just as a person in general, I never assume. I think that's the one thing that we can do that will really just bypass someone how they're feeling or what they may be experiencing. Oh, well, my teenager is just being a teenager because they want to be away from us and they want to lock themselves in their room. That's an assumption. It is cause for conversation. So we want to just never assume that somebody's behavior is just based off of their age or their gender or their role within the family. We do, especially with the pandemic, I think it just kind of brought it to the forefront of, let's not assume what somebody else is going through. Let's actually open up the floor or the conversation for us to actually get understanding from where they are coming from, not from what we are assuming they're having. And I think a lot of assumptions are deeply rooted into stigmas and myths in regards to mental health. We may not know it and it may be subconscious, but our actions are showing like, this is how we think, a teenager should act, or this is how we think a male should act or a female should act. We're assuming.
Yeah, I like that, and I think just something we haven't brought up yet, and I'm sure we probably would at some point with regard to behavioral manifestations, and along with what's already been mentioned with these patterns of behavior, is screen time. So this what's happened through pandemic and various behavior. We can't just assume that kids are the increased screen time because everybody does that. Well, no, it means that we have to take a deeper look into what's how much time is being spent. These are also entryways, entry points for things that are traumatizing, and also ways that kids are masking their behavior and their emotions and not being able to deal with. Again, we talk about anxiety, depression, and some, but these are also the causes as well because of the communication and outlets and things that kids have access to. So it causes us as as family units to make sure that we are being mindful of what's happening with that increased screen time.
Yeah. That's so real for adults too, right? Like how often do we get trapped in scrolling on the same things our kids are scrolling on, right? Because we're avoiding something, we're not wanting to address something, we're dismissing something's not comfortable. So that's real. That's real across the board.
And it's especially when it's sneaking in, right? Because there's so much that because of this lack of physical contact, we have to be on screens. Like even right now, I'm sure this would have been an event we would have had in person, and people would have came and had some food, did the whole thing. But we have to do it on the screen, right? And I think that sometimes even our work, our professions, can be ways that we are avoiding certain things and making it seem as if, oh, this is just what is a part of my day to day. This is what it is, and being able to address those things, even that may be doing a little bit of hiding in plain sight. That may be something that is an unhealthy coping skill that we're using.
Hiding in plain sight. I've always loved that term because it's so real. There's this meme that I've been seeing kind of floating around. Every time I see it, I'm just like, oh, this is so real. So there's a meme that's floating around that says, if you can pass on generational trauma, Dr. Knight gave us that statistic of 22 generations, right? So if you can pass on generational trauma, you can pass on generational healing. Right? What are some steps that you all can share, some practical steps on how people can do that?
I'm going to say an easy one is communicate. Start the conversation, be vulnerable, be open. And like, quit hiding behind masks, but communicate. As a mom, I can't do anything about like my parents and everything, that they went through. That is their responsibility to hopefully take care of. But for me and my children, I can change that. So I've changed the trajectory of how we communicate in our home, of, what they're allowed to say and how they're able to express themselves, because I don't want them to keep taking on the trauma from grandparents, mama, daddy, whatever. Like I'm responsible for what they are exposed to. So I start the conversation with them.
I want to add to that and talk about Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Doc. You good?
Rock paper scissors. Somebody, I don't know. Brother White going it. Brother White going it.
No,
Let
I
Dr.
was
Joy
just
go.
gonna say, like in the, for men in the, in the male space, we have lots of conversations, and I think just for me, it's about breaking those patterns and not being afraid to push back against those patterns because we talk about in men's spaces is, various systems of discipline, and we all have various systems passed down to us from, mom and dad and uncle, bobo, cousin, or whoever else they want the, physical discipline, all these things. And for me, in male spaces, I talk a lot about not being afraid to break those patterns, and but then also doing the skill development that's necessary in order to understand the end game with breaking that pattern. Because just because you grew up on ass whooping doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing. You can learn some new skills and you can change these and then have the same end result, and then to be able to push back against those systems, right? And there's that's where the work is done. That's where the work comes in, is being able to say, hey, we don't do that here. It's not necessary for us to do that because this is what we do here. This is the way that we communicate. And again, it's breaking those patterns that often get passed down. And that includes, financial decision making. That means emotional decision making. That means, systems of discipline and all these things. And it's just okay to learn some new skills and give yourself permission to do something different. Whooping the kids don't mean that that's guaranteed that they're gonna be, because it worked for you and 50, 11 other generations of people. Learn some new skills and be willing to do something different.
Mhm.
No, I think you said something right there because I think that's what a lot there's what a lot of the deterrent is. I think in our communities with engaging in therapy and in this process that we're talking about is that there's a lot of the things that are built into our culture that we feel like can be stripped away from us. But I
Mm.
think that sometimes we don't we have the conversation about like, oh, we shouldn't be hitting our kids type of, like, just to kind of use that as an example, and it doesn't we don't really talk as much about the tools that we should be replacing that with. And it feels like, well, what am I supposed to do if I don't do this? How am I supposed to make sure that my kids are growing up and to be healthy adults? And we can talk through a lot more. That's what a lot of these spaces are for, to gain those skills, to gain those tools that you can add to your toolkit as you're learning and break those cycles.
Facts, because you
Yeah.
don't unlearn anything. You don't unlearn how to tie your shoes. You replace it with a new way to
Yeah.
tie your shoes.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Like that.
And I'll just chime in, kind of piggybacking off of that, just basically just increasing our insight and overall awareness of our own behavior and actions that may be contributing to that generational trauma. So it's real easy to point a finger and tell, hey, mom, you did this wrong and I would do this differently. And maybe you was raised, getting spanked, and now you just choose not to spank your children and put them in a corner. If the child is still receiving the same message that you received, getting spanked, basically saying, I'm not important, I'm not being heard, something like that. It's just because that the action has changed. Like, you're no longer hitting them, you're still dismissing them. So are you really stopping the trauma by just changing that action or whatever? Or are you really taking it a step further and being able to, like, okay, once they're out of the corner, let's have a conversation. What was kind of going on with that? Like, how can we move forward from that? Just because you don't hit or you don't spank or whatever, or you're changing the behavior, are you really changing the trauma that may be associated with a new action or behavior?
That's good. So you can't only replace, you got to go a step further, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Correct.
What I was going to say earlier too was it's really about being intentional. And I think that kind of incorporates what else has already been said. But we use that word as a noun, and it really is a verb. You really have to figure out, okay, what is it that I want to do? And how do I want to do that thing or those things, as opposed to I'm just thinking about it, right? And a lot of times I think that is really hard to do. It's not as easy as we believe it is to be intentional. Like, you can put anything down on a piece of paper, but that doesn't mean you're going to get up in the morning and actually do the workout, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to dive in and really sort of decide, what is it that I really want? What is the experience that I want my family to have? What is the life experience I want for myself? And
Yeah.
how do I get there? Sometimes we think about that more with education, and we're quick to put them in a private school. If this is the story of some parents, not all, of course. But that might not be what you really want. Like, what is it that you're trying to have for them? What is it that you really need them or want them to get out of life, and what do we want for ourselves? And we have to be intentional around that.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I hear within this, I don't think we've explicitly said it, but I think it's understood in this idea of increasing insight and awareness and being intentional. But I think something that's worth us explicitly saying, because this really stood out to me when Dr. Arnold said, you can't just replace the response or the discipline. You have to go further and communicate and all those things. Is we have to heal from the generation that impacted us so that we can be able to do it different with our children and those that are around us. So not only us healing, but then Jamie said earlier, we can't be in that position of like going against the older generations of telling them you did it wrong and all these kind of things. They did the best that they could with what they knew, right? And so it's like, it's so many things that we have to make peace with in order for us to pass on that generational healing. Like, you can't pass on a healing that you don't have yet. And you can't communicate and do something that you haven't first gained and groomed and grown the skill to. So that's a whole, all those pieces is just, that's real. That's oh, y'all doing something.
Man, I'm about to say, she said you can't pass on a healing that you don't have yet. That's I forget which one of y'all said you was a PK, but that'll preach. If you grew up in the church, you know a little something about what that means. Man, okay. So, and I think too, something that I think we try to touch on and make sure we're touching on is that being in this, like, we kind of, with screen time, we're in this heavy social media age, right? Where there's a lot of information, misinformation kind of floating around out there. We've all seen the memes, the red flag challenges, all of this stuff that comes up, right? So what are some things that you've seen out there, be it a meme or just information that you've seen that you want to make sure that our community knows and understands the truth about, so that they're not being misled in any way? So, like, what are some of the things you've seen that you want to kind of make some time to debunk? I know that's you've seen a lot, so I have to take your time, figure out which one you want to pick.
Well, I'll start by something that I've noticed lately. Sometimes in practice, you start hearing people use a particular diagnosis often, over and over and over again. Okay,
come through, Dr. Knight.
And they don't quite know what it means. Okay, and then you start seeing it on social media where it's being used very often, and it's not in correct context. So I don't know that it's specifically a meme, but I will say from the mental health perspective, I really want people to give greater effort to not try to use these clinical terms and tags for people around them in their life, right? And get professional help. Get somebody to help you really understand these behaviors, and whether or not if what you think is happening, or what you think is going on with your loved one or even yourself, right? Let's get some support and really get to the bottom of things and figure out what it is before we put some really hard labels on people, and sometimes again even ourselves, because that's the one thing I think it kind of gets under my skin, especially on social media when I see it, and I'm like, why do we do that to each other?
Call a thing a thing, Dr. Knight. It's that one that start with an N.
Yes, it is. Oh. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Calling people narcissists, not understanding what bipolar disorder means.
Yes.
I'm not understanding what schizophrenia means.
Yes.
Like, I think those are the top three that I consistently see.
Yep.
I add in there.
That perpetuates the stigma.
It does. Absolutely. Yes.
I add in there just even using the word suicidal. I was a psychological intake assessor for SSM for 5 years. And people would walk in there and say, I'm suicidal. And I would have to come back and say, so you're having thoughts about wanting to kill yourself? Oh, no. I don't want to kill myself. But that's what suicidal means, right? So I try to use very direct terminology when it comes to those different things. Like, well, what are you saying? Well, I just, maybe I want to not wake up in the morning. Okay, well, I just don't want to get out the bed or whatever. That's different. That's very different than you actually want to go out, have a plan, and wanting to harm yourself, or harm is different than to kill, So being very intentional, like we talked about earlier, about what words are we really using and what are we really meaning, and how are we even educating these people about what these words are.
Yeah, the other thing that I think happens with that, just to piggyback off of that too, right? And I think this goes into what Mr. White said earlier as well, is when people are putting these frameworks around somebody that they love or even themselves, it carries a set of behaviors that goes with it. Right. If I see my partner as narcissist, that takes a lot off me, because this person doesn't have the ability or the will, if to do X, Y, and Z in this relationship, right? It's on them. It's not on me. And so that becomes one of my concerns, when people automatically sort of like give me those big words, and I'm just sort of like, tell me what's happening. What are the behaviors that you see? What do we need to look at in terms of change? But yeah, it definitely sort of like, I think, takes responsibility off of the person that's sometimes throwing those things out if they don't necessarily know what it is.
Yeah. Josh just said, That's how you know you hit something.
Man, just trying to put that into I was like, so I may be using this term that I think is describing the pain that I'm, because it's not to say that the pain that, or whatever you're experiencing there isn't real, but making sure that you're seeing it from, like you say, you may be trying to extend some healing to your partner. You may be trying to extend some healing, but you got to heal with whatever it is that you're dealing with first, I think is what I'm hearing there. Now, that's powerful.
I was going to mention that with the red flags thing.
Lord.
It's putting so much on the other person of what they did wrong and how they messed up. But it's like, where's that self-reflection? What are your own personal red flags? What are things that you need to work on while you so caught on trying to catch somebody else's? What's going on with you that you tolerated somebody who had these red flags or something like that?
Right. That's when we start to have conversations about projection and deflection and what that looks like in their own behavior. So that's a whole other talk show.
Man, that's a whole hour and a half by itself, ain't it? Man, it's no, that's some good stuff. And I think that self-reflection is something that we can miss a lot. Because I mean, like you said, it's always going to be a lot easier to look at and point at somebody else's stuff before it is, than it is to do that work that requires. But we talked about it before. It takes that intentionality to be able to even begin to think about doing that process.
I think it's because we got to remember that our work doesn't stop. So I think our generation, you went to therapy for 8 weeks, or you read these couple self-help books, or you did this or you did that, and you're so above things now. And our work doesn't stop. There are going to be consistent things that we experience, that we come against. Somebody commented earlier that she's given herself grace for the parent that she was years ago, right? Like every day is giving us a new experience with ourselves, and our work doesn't stop.
Yeah. That's so true. Because even I don't want to speak for all the clinicians on this panel, but speaking for myself, I can formulate all the things you want to know and understand around trauma, and things I understand and can explain to somebody else. But it's a whole different process when I'm in my therapist's office and getting my work done. I do like, so what? A lot of questions. So what would you tell one of your clients? And the things that I would tell, I have to make sure that I am doing that work within myself. Just because I understand these things, and I may even be able to point to what it is the work I need to do, I still got to wake up in the morning and do the work. It's even in understanding. It's one thing to grasp it, it's a whole nother thing to put it into practice. For sure.
Where we at, y'all? What questions? It had been a whole sermon. Then started.
Man, oh man.
Let's see. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to continue with kind of moving into the next thing. I guess just kind of we touched on it a little bit, but I guess just really what it means to kind of what is resetting me and reflecting on what that is within your specialties, and kind of your personal approach, whether it's into some of the therapies or the modalities that you use. What would you say is your perspective on how individuals can reset with therapy? How is therapy somewhere? How can we make sure it's a space where that resetting process is taking place?
For me, especially working, and I don't work solely with men. I have all kinds of clients, but I think for me, I think one of the main things is acceptance. we spend a lot of time processing on, much like we were saying earlier, with developing those new skills and replacing those behaviors, those former behaviors. And there's been a combination of things, and like Melissa just said, it's acceptance is huge, and that's how we get to the point where we can acknowledge, hey, you know what, mom, dad, or whatever have you, I want to do something different, and then develop an emotional intelligence and the vocabulary that goes along with that, and teaching those new things is just accepting that that's just the way that it was, right? And in order to understand that, mom and dad and grandma, they did the best that they could, there's an acceptance that comes along with that. And that's a huge word, especially that we talk about with men, in this kind of disarming in a lot of ways, just to actually accept that this is the situation that you were born into. You couldn't change that. But what we can change now is what we teach moving forward, what you do moving forward, and how the outcomes that we're looking for moving forward. So I place a huge, huge emphasis on acceptance and what that looks like, whether that's church hurt, whether that is, whatever the situation is. That's a great entry point, because sometimes people are still pushing back against the people in those situations that cause that trauma, and it's just accepting that. And somebody mentioned earlier forgiveness. I don't know if it was Melissa earlier to mention something about forgiveness, but acceptance is a huge part of that. It's accepting that a person, you had higher expectations for a person and they weren't able to meet them, or expectations for yourself and they fell short. And so that's a huge word for me in my practice, is focusing on acceptance.
I want to just add to that too, that looking for a therapist that you can truly connect with and be vulnerable with is, telling y'all, just got tongue tied.
We're gonna make it.
Yeah, we're gonna make it. Finding a therapist that you can connect with is very important, right? So that you can really sort of dive in and be authentic, be open with whatever it is that you really want to work through, right? And I think sometimes when that doesn't happen, and sometimes people aren't ready, I'll say that too, but when that doesn't happen and people still can't really tackle the issues, then therapy doesn't give them the benefits, right, that you really can get when you feel like you can be open with somebody and talk to them about what they really need. So I encourage people, like, shop around, find somebody that really works for you, that you can connect with. Everybody is not a good fit for every situation or for everybody else, but find somebody that you really can connect with so you can do the work.
Absolutely. And just to kind of give a pointer, again, not speaking for all clinicians or anybody on this panel, speak for me, because I want to let somebody know, please let me know if I'm not a good fit, because I want to help you find what you need, and it may not be me. And if you feeling like you have a therapist might be pushing back in some way, that's your red flag challenge right there. That's your red flag right there, to kind of, that may not be a good fit. That may be somebody that may not be fitting you clinically. So that it's okay to move beyond that if you're feeling like those aren't things that you can have, or even push back and get what you need out of a space within there.
Yeah, that's huge, and that's part of that education piece for us as clinicians. And I know I spend some time with my clients and letting them know that before we get started, because I let them know, like, my delivery style is not for everybody. This is an interview, a relationship building process, and they may not be familiar with these various different theoretical orientations, and so they need to understand how that manifests in this relationship building process as well, and not be so ready to hop in, problem solve, or whatever, because many of them are already in crisis when they show up. It's just understanding that this is a relationship building process, and it takes time. And this is what they can do to help themselves in that interview process, so that they can ask us questions to make sure that the relationship is a good fit. Because ethically, our duty is to not harm them, and we don't want to continue to see them if it's not a good fit.
Yeah, for sure.
Dr. Arnold or Jamise, how would you recommend people reset?
Oh, I was going to say one of the biggest things, kind of what he told you was said along with acceptance, was being honest. I'm a big believer of, like, you can't heal what you won't reveal. So be honest where you're at the time that you want therapy, because too many times we can't get into a point where the therapist is working harder than the person. So if you're not ready to necessarily be as vulnerable, be as accepting, and be as honest, then maybe it's not the time to reset with therapy. Maybe you need to reset with your friends or something like that. But when you're able to be honest and be able to accept the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes with whatever that is going on around
And I just want to pinpoint too, like when we're talking about acceptance, we're not talking about condoning, we're not talking about giving into, we're not, that's not what we're talking. We're talking about being able to acknowledge that this is. And that's simply what acceptance is, because a lot of us spend a lot of time resisting the realities of our experiences, and it just constantly keeps a wall in between us and what in that space of healing. So we're I just want to make sure that there's clarity there, that we're not saying that you just have to just be continuing in that cycle of victimhood. And I think it's about moving beyond that, and that first step is acceptance, for sure. I'm sorry, I had to throw that in there just because I think people get confused when we use words like acceptance. It can feel shaming or in some way, or like, where and I just want to be clear. But Dr. Arnold, I know would you have anything to add to kind of what this reset process is?
Yeah, it's kind of just basically summarizing what everybody else has kind of have been saying. I really do believe that building that therapeutic relationship is the first level of being able to reset. When I think about building a therapeutic relationship with my client, I want to build a relationship that they have not had anywhere else. It should be very different than any other relationship that they have had. And so with that, I really do try to walk with them through their journey. I like to be empathetic and not sympathetic. I'm not going to be sorry for you, but I will walk with you in this journey. So I want to, when it comes to resetting, allowing that space to be able to say, I'm going to come in fresh with this, and I want to be able to do the work, which we call in marriage and family therapy and experimental theorists, the battle for initiative. As in, you're going to come in, you're going to be present, you're going to be on time, and you're going to be engaging in an active participant in your therapeutic healing. Whereas the battle for structure is for me as a therapist. I am the one who's able to tell them what time they come in, what are we going to be doing, like what some different things that we can kind of talk about it within therapy, and let me open up that space for you to be able to tell me what you need. So like it's a give and take with everything, but I want the relationship to be boundaried, but clear and positive and empathetic, So I think if you have a therapist, like you say, find a therapist that you can mesh well with, and use it as an opportunity to start creating a type of relationship that you may want to be able to move forward with other people in your life. Like, I like how this relationship was, so I want to be able to mimic it and have boundaries, appropriate ones, with each members of my families, whether it's your mother, your father, your coworker, or whoever, So I think it just offers an opportunity to reset as soon as you walk into the door.
Yeah, that's really good. And I want to share with everyone that the key indicator across we have a licensed marriage family therapist, we have a licensed professional counselors, we have licensed clinical social workers, and all of us that do therapy, research shows that the success that people have in therapy, the highest indicator is a therapeutic relationship, right? So that's being comfortable and feeling like you can be vulnerable, feeling like it's a safe space, and feeling like you have trust in your therapist to guide you through what you're experiencing. I do want to clarify though that when we talk about coming in being vulnerable and being revealing so that you can heal and all of that, that is not being expected in the first session. Right? I think there's so much pressure put on. It has to be fireworks and this instant connection thing that happens in the first session. And for some people it might, right? Like I've had some first sessions where it's just like, okay, we just know. But there are some like we have to understand, and us as the professionals are aware that you are speaking to us as strangers for the first time with your most hurtful, hard, weary things that you've experienced in your life. So we are not expecting for you to dump all things at our feet the first session, but we are just expecting for you to be aware that that's part of the process at some point in time. All right. So I just want to add to this with that in mind, come with your questions, right?
Yes.
It's when we talk about a good fit, it goes both ways. So you might have some questions for us. You might want to know what our background includes, what things we might be more trained in than others. I will say to everybody, seek someone that has a specialty in what it is that you're experiencing, right? Because that means that we are investing more time in professional development and continuing education in that thing. So if you know you are really, really, really experiencing some very high anxiety, reach out to a therapist that you see clearly on their bio, their website somewhere, that they specialize in anxiety disorders, and so forth and so on. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think there's a lot of pressure sometimes that people that have not been to therapy yet feel like, okay, I got to have all these things together. I got to be able to pour it all out. I got to make sure I choose the right fit. And that's not fair. Like, that's not fair to you at all. It is still a process that we go through and that you go through. And there's some time that goes into building that relationship, just like time goes into building relationships with anybody else.
Absolutely. No, I think it's important that we're giving this information about what folks can expect in this space, because like we've talked about there, with all of the stigma, all the trauma that we talk about, I think these are certain specifics that I think are getting in a lot of folks' way because they don't know what to expect. So I'm glad we got a table full of Black mental health professionals that can kind of enlighten us and kind of shed light to what that process can and does look like. Yeah, so I mean, I just realized we kind of winding down to our last few minutes.
Yeah.
And I guess with that, I guess in closing, I guess we can ask the question of if I don't know, because I have a question here, and I'll just stick with what I got. I almost turned it on his head a little bit, but I don't want to do that to catch anybody off guard. So so if we had 3 takeaways for the audience about being intentional about this kind of restoration and this resetting process within our home life, what are 3 takeaways that you will want them to walk away with today?
I can say one, that therapy is not just for when you're in crisis, it's also proactive. So even if there's nothing necessarily going wrong in your life, great. But it still is okay to get that checkup. It's still okay to get some outside, information, or, yeah, you just don't have to be in crisis just to be in therapy. It could very much be preventative.
For me, I guess my 3 would be mindful so you could be able to create a better awareness. Be patient and kind to yourself during your process of healing or through your therapeutic process. I think we often get, like she said, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves sometimes. Be kind to yourself, because it is a process. And remember that you cannot change nobody's behavior. You can only change your own. And I think a lot of times when you see people trying to come into therapy, they want to change everybody else around them. And it gets frustrating. I just want them to listen. I want them to do this or that. You can't change nobody's behavior. You can only change your own in hopes that will promote change in their behavior. You have to change yours first.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to write them down because try to sum things up with 3 points, man.
It's tough, ain't it?
So this is what I got. One is you matter, right? I mean, we talk a lot we've talked a lot in this last year or two about what matters, who matters. You matter. What's happening with your experience, what's happening in your body, in your relationships, those things matter. If you are ready to take time to talk to somebody and really dive in, do it. The second thing is we are here. Black therapists are out here. A lot of times folks don't know that we are here. We are here, and we love y'all. We love our community. We love our people, and we are ready to serve. So we're here. There are people here in this world who want to support you. And the other thing is relationships are necessary. So let's try to make them as healthy as possible, and it was just said, sometimes that means boundaries, and that we have to move away from toxic relationships. But relationships are necessary. We are relational beings. And so we need to work to try to make those relationships as healthy as possible.
My 3, number 1, start. It's where start somewhere. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't look for perfection throughout this process. The goal is to make some progress. So start. That's the first thing. Second thing, give yourself some grace. There's been a lot of things that have happened. What I'm saying? We're not worried about, what's wrong with you. We're worried about what happened to you. So give yourself some grace and acknowledging that some things have happened that have resulted in you being in the space that you're in. And then the third thing is just just trust the process, right? And just trust the process. And again, like Melissa said, about relationships, and like all of us have said about relationships, human beings don't exist outside of relationships. I learned that from one of my, favorite grad school professors. And everything that we do is a function of relationship dynamics. And so the goal is to make those as healthy as possible, realizing where we need to prune. If we don't, go finish out with the benediction, we got to understand where some of these relationships that need to be pruned, some people that need to be pruned, some of those things, and then just giving ourselves a chance to start fresh. You can start fresh. You can give yourself an opportunity to start fresh.
Or the doors of the church are open. He said we gave a benediction. All of that. No, this has been wonderful. I'm so grateful that, like you said, that we got to share in this experience to show the world and everybody that was able to tune in today that Black therapists are here. We have the knowledge, we have the skill set, we have the passion. But what stuck with me the most is that you said we here and we love y'all. And that I know that couldn't be any truer for anybody else on this panel. So we thank you all for being with us today, and just sharing your wealth of knowledge and experiences, and allowing us to really extend this community of healing that we're having, and expanding upon that as we look for this not only in our individual lives, but looking forward to in our communities and the people alongside of us in this journey as well.
Yeah, we have a few minutes if there are any questions that
Mhm.
anyone that's with us today. I did see a question from, I believe it was Shannon, and we're going to have the winner of the giveaway
Yes.
here in a couple seconds. But I thought it would be great for us to just take some questions for the audience as well. And the first one that I saw was someone asked, was there a question, or I'm sorry, an app or something
Mhm.
to find therapists and to see counselors' profiles? I won't say that there is an app, but there are several websites that you can go to, and I will make sure that we get them dropped in the comments as well. A huge website that I love to recommend is therapyforblackgirls.com. There's also a therapyforblackmen.org. We have inclusivetherapist.com. We have blackfemaletherapist.com. For individuals who might not have insurance or who might need some financial support with therapy, you have the Loveland Foundation that gives vouchers for therapy. We also have openpathcollective.org, where no therapist on that site can charge you more than $60 a session if you don't have insurance or something like that. And I know many of our practices and things also might offer some kind of sliding scales or reduced fee programs as well. So I will make sure to get all of those in the comments. And that's a really, really great question. But any other questions from the audience before we share with you all who our giveaway winner is?
We got our eyes on the comment section, y'all. Somebody is asking, so how would the first session go if you're interviewing them and they're interviewing you? So how would that go? Kind of the duality that's there, as they're kind of, as we're assessing and the person is kind of interviewing us to see if we're a good fit.
That's a great question. Any of our panelists can take it.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think for me, just just first of all, letting the client know that that there can be an interview process, and that's that education piece, and then helping them understand that even if not there, because it doesn't have to be perfect, to the kinds of questions that they can ask or whatever have you. And so again, it could, I don't know if there's a should, but it could be a Q&A session just to ask about specific things. It's as a client, it's whatever you need that session to be in order for it to make to make progress. If that's you asking questions, and we can help frame those questions, or in that if you do, a therapist may provide some kind of a consultation prior to that session, where different kinds of questions or whatever have you, and you can come to the session, ready to dive in and ask those things. And there can be a Q&A. Don't be afraid, to push back, but it's whatever it is that you're curious about or whatever have you. Some of us will self-disclose more than others, but it can be a genuine conversation that's happened. I think that's the word that I need to put into the atmosphere. It's a conversation that's taking place.
I wanted to add to that because I actually had a person who legit interviewed me in my consultation. And I see that somebody questions like, what does somebody ask? But this person literally asked me, like, do you eat in your sessions? Do you have your phone like in the camera on your sessions? Like, what's in your background? Because she had experienced some bad things with the therapist of eating or answering the phone and all these other things. So I had to assure her what my practices are and what I do in therapy and what I don't do in therapy. And I still gave her the option to see if she wanted to come back, and she did. So yeah.
Well, I know there's a lot of us too who offer free consultations. And so, you can have a 30-minute consultation, 20 minutes or whatever, to just sort of talk to the therapist about sort of what your main needs are. My question is always, what made you decide that at this point you wanted to have a little extra support in your journey? And I think somebody said, well, what does the client ask? And you can ask anything. You can ask even like, what is this process supposed to look like? And allow the therapist to give you some information in terms of how they actually carry out the business of counseling and therapy. Ask about their experience as a therapist. How long have you been a therapist? And what sort of populations have you worked with? And then even with that, you might have additional questions that come after you start to hear more about their experience.
Who Dr. Knight said the business of counseling, right? This is a professional thing. That goes to some of the questions that Jamie said that someone asked her. Like, we got to remember that we are showing up as professionals in that space, even if you're doing it from home through telehealth or whatever. So I love that Dr. Knight said the business of counseling, because it should really be approached that way at all times. So this is a good segue for you all to let us know how can everyone find you, whether it's through website, IG, Facebook, LinkedIn. What's the best way for individuals to find you all?
With me, I'm old school, even though I'm pretty young. I'm in my early 30s, but I do a lot by word by mouth, and I'm on a lot of insurance panels. So I do accept Cigna, Missouri Medicaid, United Healthcare, and Anthem, Home State. I'm on pretty much all the major insurances. So you can always find me on there. And that's where I get most of my referrals from, or either just word of mouth. And I just give them my phone number and then they just kind of call. But yeah, I don't really do social media. I have a page, but I'm not gonna check it. I'm not gonna lie. but if you my
website, phone number, if somebody is seeing this and they say, I need to reach out to Dr. Arnold, what do you want us to give them?
You can give them my phone number. It's area code 314-250-6618. And it's confidential voicemail, so you can go ahead and leave a voicemail if you need to.
Thank you. What about you, Dr. Knight?
So my website is Liberty Counseling and Consulting, STL.com. My phone number is 314-943-2399. Again, also a confidential voicemail is there as well. And I'm also on Psychology Today. So I don't know if we mentioned that as a website to see different profiles as well, but I'm also there. So those are my primary modes of contact.
Thank you. What about you, Mr. White?
I also have a Psychology Today profile, and I can be reached directly from my website, which is just my name, etoyawhite.com. My contact number is 314-484-8330, which also has confidential voicemail. My email address is coaching@etoyawhite.com. And I'm on various social media platforms. Please avoid trying to reach me through Facebook Messenger, because that's where conversations go to die. Give me a call or shoot me an email, because it'll sit in Facebook Messenger forever. But I'm on Instagram, Grown Man Business. I'm on TikTok, Grown Man Business. Those are the main ways to reach me for clinical purposes.
And we have a number correction. Let's make sure we get that for Dr. Arnold. It's 6618, not 6619. And Jamie.
All right. I am also on Psychology Today. And then you can also visit the website, The Purpose Driven Counselor, and suggest me as a therapist that you want to see. Or you can call, leave a message, also confidential, on 314-669-5353.
Great. Great. So we're going to be making sure to put all this information into the chat for everybody that's looking at, because I get questions all the time. Where can I find a Black therapist? You have some opportunities now, so take advantage of this as a resource for sure. But we can't close out today without sharing with you who our winner is for our giveaway. So without further ado, the winner for our giveaway is Anastasia Stevenson. So Anastasia, so if you're able, please contact Queen of Resilience by email at info@qornow.com. So we'll put that information in the chat as well. And we will get you in contact with Miss Lynn's candles of affirmation. So we'll make sure that we get that information to you so that you can get that giveaway prize. So congratulations to Anastasia on being our winner, and thank you, Anastasia, for engaging with us today. It looks like we had some great engagement, some great questions. We appreciate everybody just stopping through and spending your Sunday afternoon with us.
Yes, congratulations. This was an awesome conversation. I
Man.
want to thank all of our panelists for being with us today. Thank you for all just the value and insight that you all shared. This was an expansive, really, really great conversation. And we just appreciate you all for officially teaching us how to reset with therapy today. All right.
All righty.
Anything, Josh?
No, that's it. Just on behalf of Queen of Resilience, again, we thank you all for being in attendance, and just be on your P's and the Q's for the next thing we have coming up. We're always looking to pour into our community. So thank you again for attending, and we'll be back again with you soon.
Awesome. See you all. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.